Hello, all you patrons. We have another pre-show for you. Gather round.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Summer is fighting for its life, but it's going to lose to autumn sooner or later. It can't hold on much longer. So don't be afraid. You see, I'm actually wearing tweed today. You notice this?
Well, that makes sense because didn't you have the rule? Like what the seersucker ruler? It's
Yeah,
Labor Day, right? It's
yeah,
Labor Day
Labor
is the
Day.
turning point. Yeah.
No seersucker, no linen suits. You don't wear white. But while this is a very autumnal coat, you notice I'm not wearing a tweed. I'm not wearing any waistcoat yet because it's
Right.
still too warm.
Hmm.
But that's the, you know,
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. It's nice to see the changing of the seasons a little bit, if only from afar.
well, yeah, yeah. You wait till winter time, you'll see me all bundled up here, and then
Yeah.
you'll be glad you're seeing it from afar. Although I enjoy winter, I have to admit.
I mean, do you enjoy winter because of the holidays, or do you enjoy winter for winter?
Both. I mean, I love Christmas and New Year's and the Epiphany and Candlemas and all the rest of it. I really do. But I also enjoy the light and dark. You know, there's nothing quite like beautiful architecture at night with snow lit, by street lamps and so on. It's got a very romantic, very wonderful feeling. And of course, in this part of the world, where the Advent and Christmas markets are such a big deal, uh, it's cold as blazes, but every town of any size, every village, there'll be a bunch of booths putting out hot spiced wine, Glühwein, and drinking that stuff in the cold, and a whole bunch of other people huddled around, and everyone in pretty jovial spirits. It's neat. It's just like we used to be in the golden days of hot toddies and Tom and Jerry's and hot buttered rums and eggnogs and well, anyway, I don't want to give the impression of being too hot booze oriented.
All right.
I don't want to give that impression.
No, you don't want to give that impression. Um, what was that one drink I want? You had told us about a drink that was so it was so popular during Christmas time that apparently people were saying in articles back in the day in the 1920s that Christmas was made for this drink.
Yeah,
It was like a
the
Tom Collins, Tom
Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry. I asked the bartender to make me a Tom and Jerry, and he's like, "Dude, I don't have an hour." He's because apparently it's very involved.
It is involved, but the results are so yummy.
You know. So, I mean, how does one get a Tom and Jerry? Is it possible, or you have to hand craft it?
Well, they used to actually have Tom and Jerry mixes. I don't think they make them anymore. But
Is it
let me see. Just for grins, let's look at Tom and I know they still make them a lot in the Midwest. But let's see, Tom and Jerry's uh, drink.
so? It looks like you got boiling water, dark rum, cognac, uh, batter,
Yeah, you
whole
make a batter
milk,
for it.
nutmeg, ground cloves, and then ground allspice, just as a garnish.
Let me see. Where to find a Tom and Jerry cocktail in Los Angeles? Uh,
It says
well,
separate. Oh wow, you have to make the batter.
yeah. Um,
Separate 3 egg yolks and whites and set aside. In a non-reactive bowl, whip the egg whites with 1/4 teaspoon cream of tartar until stiff peaks form. In a separate bowl, beat the yolks with 1 cup of sugar, half-ounce Jamaican dark rum, and a quarter teaspoon vanilla extract. When the yolk mixture is completely combined, gently fold it into the white egg mixture. Or the egg white mixture. Keep refrigerated. That's
The
like,
Tom and Jerry has some. There's a set that comes with it.
So that makes sense because like the bartender's not gonna have access to eggs. That's not something you keep in a bar.
Yeah,
And some sugar.
I'm looking for. Is there any place that still makes it in LA? Oh, I like this. Do you know Tom and Jerry? It's a demographic question. If you do, you're showing either your age or your regional roots.
What, the cartoon or the drink? Wait, what?
The drink.
Okay.
Let me see. I am looking. They still drink it in the Midwest. But I'm just not seeing anything in the big nowhere.
All right. What are your top 5 favorite cocktails?
All right. Well, since we're talking about it, Tom and Jerry, Manhattan and Bronx cocktail.
What is that?
A Bronx cocktail is a third gin, a third orange juice, a sixth dry, and a sixth sweet vermouth. So let's see. What have we got so far? Tom and Jerry,
Manhattan.
Manhattan.
What's in a Manhattan? I've never had a Manhattan.
Manhattan is rye whiskey for me anyway. You can have it with bourbon, but I prefer it with rye. Rye whiskey with a touch of either, depending on whether you want a dry or a sweet Manhattan, dry or sweet vermouth. And if it's a dry Manhattan, you want a twist. If it's a sweet Manhattan, you want a cherry. And what's interesting about that is that in the East, if you don't specify, they give you a dry Manhattan. But in the West, if you don't specify, they'll give you a sweet Manhattan. I like them both. And then Gibson, a gin Gibson, I like very much. And I have one more, but there's so many to choose from. I would say, in honor of my mother, although I don't have them very often, I'll say a Brandy Alexander.
A Brandy Alexander? What is that?
Well, it's got brandy, it's got cream, and some other things in it. Let me see. Brandy, I'll tell you the exact. I've never made one. Creme de cacao and cream and cognac. It's easy to make and even easier to drink. Well, yeah, my mother loved them. Let's see. In making it, she would take hers neat. She didn't like them with ice. Yeah, here it is. You take brandy, straight up chilled without ice. Your specified ingredients: 30 milliliters of cognac, so it's equal parts cognac, creme de cacao, brown, and fresh cream. Pour all ingredients into cocktail shaker filled with ice cubes, shake, and strain into a chilled cocktail glass. Now, there was another drink she liked, the King Alphonse, which was creme de cacao with a cream header.
You're missing a very important drink, Charles. I'm
What am I
ashamed of
missing?
you.
Bloody Mary?
You're missing the good old-fashioned tequila and Ovaltine.
Oh, yes. Well, there's that. There's that. Uh, but what was the one Mother used to drink other than this is annoying. Brandy Alexander, but there was another one she very much liked, um, which was a sidecar. That was it. That's what it was called, a sidecar. Went into that. Um, yeah, a sidecar is here we go. Yeah, she liked brandy. My mother did. Uh, 50 milliliters cognac, 20 milliliters triple sec, 20 milliliters fresh lemon juice. Pour all ingredients into a cocktail shaker. Shake well with ice. Strain into a chilled cocktail glass. The sidecar. That was it. She liked those.
Hmm.
She and I the last after Dad died, I would take her drinking 2 or 3 times a month, which she really enjoyed. And she would summon up cocktails from her memory, from her girlhood, her youth in New York. And sometimes they were a challenge. The King Alphonse would often be a challenge for bartenders. But sometimes she'd click, with a bartender her age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She'd go, "Oh man, I haven't had to make one of those in years. Lady, you got class." That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my mother would just sit there beaming. Oh man.
So
Yeah, we will not see those days again.
okay, so I feel like your list was very much in one direction, which is fine. So I'm gonna have you
What do
branch
you
out
mean
a
One
little bit.
Direction? That's a boy band. I've never heard them.
Okay.
Do you listen to boy bands? I don't.
Okay. Uh, all right, where was I? Okay. So
You're gonna come up with cocktails that I missed entirely.
favorite drink with vodka.
Oh, with vodka, Bloody Mary.
Okay. How about rum?
Um, boy, there's several there. The Cuba Libre, of course. That's a rum and coke sort of with lime juice. Um, but a zombie, of course. How can I
Okay.
forget the delicious zombie?
Okay.
I used to, I told you, Van Halen and I used to do the Five Zombie Club at the Nino by USC. You had to be able to drink 5 zombies in succession with your lunch and then be able to function the rest of the afternoon.
Wow.
No vomiting.
No vomiting. Okay.
No vomiting. And that, some people could hack it, other people couldn't. I mean, I probably couldn't myself now, but there were giants on the earth in those days. And I remember Mark Dockery came in, the late lamented Mark Dockery. Everybody's dead. Maybe they drank too much. Anyway, Mark Dockery came in where Matt and I were holding court with our respective zombies. And he says, "You guys in your 5 zombie club." He goes up to the bartender and says, "Give me a double zombie." And the bartender, who's a German, Gerhard or something, he looks at Mark and says, "Sir, I can make you 2 zombies. I can make you 3 or 4 or 5, like your friends are having. But I cannot make you a double." And he pulls out the glass. "Let me explain why." And he makes the zombie. Because it was basically 3 kinds of rum with a 151 header on top of it and then a little bit of juice. And he says, "So you see, there is no rum. I cannot make it a double. There is just not enough rum. If you gave me a glass twice this tall, then I could make you a double. But I don't think you could carry it all the way to the table." So that was the end of that attempt at putting us in our place. But yeah, the dear old zombie, and of course the Mai Tai is okay. There's the Scorpion. Was another rum drink that used to be very much favored at Chinese restaurants. They call them Polynesian, but the food would be basically Chinese, American Chinese, and the drinks would be all tiki tiki. There was one place we used to go to that had a drink they called a Lollapalooza that was for two people and came in this sort of ceramic shell. And it was big. And I'll tell you what, three of those things and you were on your way, let me tell you.
Hmm.
I told you about the cheapest, quickest drunk I ever had in my life, didn't I?
Yes. Where you guys were dehydrated and you
Yes,
just gave blood.
yes. We'd walked a mile and a half
the
down the
stars
street.
aligned for just
One drink apiece. Boom.
yeah.
That was sad.
That
was very sad.
Ah,
But it was cheap, I'll tell you.
yeah.
Talk about bang for your buck. Woof.
All right. Questions. Are you ready?
Are ready.
All right. Gentlemen, this is the father of Andrew from New Jersey. To further complicate matters, my name is also Andrew, and I also currently reside in New Jersey. Kindly refer to me as Andrew the Elder.
Andrew the Elder from the Garden State.
I do not find the term insulting, since it is quite true. I had the good fortune of meeting Charles in person last October. We met briefly at the Old 76 House, one of the finest eateries in this area, where you can both fill your stomach and empty your wallet simultaneously.
Yes.
Now for my question. A number of pundits, including Christopher Hitchens and Jody Picou, have coined the expression, everyone has a book in them. Since Charles is currently engaged in writing not one but two books, perhaps he could share with us how he goes about writing a book from start to finish, from getting the idea to doing the initial research to presenting the idea to a publisher to doing the actual writing, the whole Megillah. I appreciate you answering my question.
Yowza. Okay, well, here's the story, Morning Glory. It's not as simple as you might think. One thing, book ideas generally came in one of two ways, actually. I might come up with a book idea, or my agent might. And if I came up with an idea, then I'd come up with an idea and I would run it past him. And if he thought he could sell it, he would say as much. If not, he would say, wow, that'd be a great idea for a university press. Meaning it didn't have any commercial merit. This was back in the days, you see, when I was dealing with the secular publishers in New York. My agent's retirement has kind of shifted me back to the Catholic market. I've never gotten a replacement for him. He's still with us, thank God. He's still a good friend, but he's out of the trade. But the other thing that would happen with him is it would come with him. And what would happen is that it's different now, but in those days, he would go to lunch with the representative of a publisher. And the publisher, who would be looking to do books on this, that, or the other, would say, do you have anyone in your stable who could do this, that, or the other? And then he would think about his clients. And if he thought someone was up to it, he would say, yeah, so-and-so could do that. And then he would get a hold of so-and-so, yours truly being one of these, and say, do you think you could do a book on this and such for so-and-so? And if you thought so, you'd say yes. If not, no. So those are the two ways the books I've written have come about. That was the way the rum book came about. That was the way the Haunted Castles and Haunted Places books came about. The initiative didn't come from me, but it was something that I knew that I could write about. And so I did. So you got to remember, and this is something that people often forget, writing is a profession. And if that's what you do for a living, you have to like survive and stuff. And so very often I've had people say, it's terrible that you wrote this in such a book about this and such a topic. Well, usually, of course, they haven't actually bothered to read the book. So, for instance, my uh, both of my ghost books and the horror fiction anthology, I dealt at some length in my introductions and various other places with the Catholic doctrines in these places, even though it was for a secular publisher. And they took it because of my presumed expert status. Every book I ever wrote for a secular publisher had at least one point I wanted to get across on my own, if that makes sense. But you see, people who don't write for a living, who do something else for a living, don't realize that very often you've got to take work the way you do doing anything else. So, like, for instance, if you were to ask the average traditionalist who's working in a store or for an insurance company or at a bakery, and you asked him, do you make sure that your clients are only believing Catholics? What do you suppose the response would be?
No.
How dare they? Don't you know you can only do business with believing Catholics?
Yeah.
Well, no. See, I know you think you have a living to raise, but the fact is, if you do business with anyone who isn't a believing Catholic, you're evil. At least that's what I've been told. However, that only applies to writers and not to everybody else who are free to, do whatever they choose. Not that we're bitter.
Right.
So the second thing is that once one has either come up with an idea that's been purchased, because I never write a book before it's bought. That's a rule I have. I
It's a good
never write a
rule.
book before it's bought. Well, you've only got so much time, and the older you get, the less time you have. There's a lot of things you'd like to write.
That's actually not 100% true. I mean, it's kind of true, but Star Spangled Crown didn't happen that way.
No, but Star Spangled Crown is, as in so many other ways, Star Spangled Crown was a one of a kind deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I've asked I've not asked anyone. I've been asked if I would revisit the world of Star Spangled Crown, and I can't see how I would.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean,
Sure.
I could write a story set in that world, but I'm not a fiction writer, and the chances of any publisher being willing to take a chance on a novel that doesn't have any porn in it, and that isn't a children's novel, it's very unlikely.
And also
So,
not marketed to women because chick lit, there's
well,
a lot of money in that.
see, that's the other thing. I mean, guys don't read,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's their loss, of course, and it reinforces the subconscious feeling of superiority, of intellectual superiority that women today have over men. I could just say that it's probably a wise move not to live down to the bad stereotypes people have of you.
Okay.
No, it's true. I mean, if you belong to an ethnicity that's renowned for being tight-fisted, try to be generous. If you belong to one that's renowned for being heavy drinkers, try not to. Try not to live down to the stereotype, because I guarantee you people are waiting to point you out as an example of how all you people are, whoever they may be, whoever you people may be. So let's try not to live down to our stereotypes. But where was I? So you've got the book deal. Now you do your research. How long does that take? Well, it depends on the topic. Obviously, the more you already know about it, then the easier the research. The less you know, the more you have to educate yourself. I mean, the rum book took a great deal of research because I didn't know that much about rum. I know a lot more now, but I didn't then. Uh, I had a good basic grasp of history, and that allowed me. And one of the things that gave the rum book a certain amount of praise amongst people was that it wasn't just a quote unquote shallow survey of the drink.
Mm.
I looked into its historical and sociological and religious connections because those interested me. I mean, you'll find recipes there, you'll find recommendations. I mean, I learned a lot about rum in writing the book, but it's true of anything. Anytime you write a book in an area that you're not really that much of an expert on, you have to make yourself one really quick. Anyway, then comes the writing. The writing usually is the shortest part of the process, uh, but it's the most intense because you're fighting for time to write against everything else you have to do. And that's what I'm in now. And when you're not working, the little voice in the back of your head says, "Why aren't you working?" And when you are working, the little voice in the back of your head says, "Why aren't you playing?" One of the things I've always thought was very unfair about being a writer, not toward the writers, but the people around it, is that it's very, very hard to get yourself to write, to motivate yourself to sit down and do the work. It's very hard to do that. Um, and any interruption up until the time you start writing is welcome. But then you actually start writing and then you get into it. And then you become very resentful of any interruption, often likely to explode at people who interrupt you. And if you live with someone like that, that's horrible. Because, this morning you were willing to help me go for a walk. I thought you would have appreciated an interruption. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. So then you get the thing done. And then when you get it done, several things happen. An enormous amount of relief and a weird feeling of loss. It's strange. It's self-contradictory, but you're glad to be done with it, and you're also a little saddened to be finished. Um, and then, of course, it gets published, and you have to do the promotion, which is one of my favorite bits of it, really, because you get to interact with your readers. And I can tell you, writing being as it is a very lonely business, when you get out and you see people and they tell you they love your work, they're really benefited by it. It's good. But the other thing there too, I have to admit, is that having been raised by a couple of actors, I was taught that the audience always comes first, and that as a carryover to my readership, because as a writer, I wouldn't exist without them. And so when I've gone on book tours and all that, sometimes the last thing I've wanted to do is sign for 150, 250 people because you write something interesting in their book. I made a promise to myself when I began that I would never just say best wishes. It's boring. So I'll always ask people where they're from or something, and you know something I could write teasingly that in future years they look at it, they'll read it and get a smile off it. And sometimes that's very, very tiring, but I owe it to my audience because without them, I'd be nothing.
Hmm.
And I have something of a dislike both of writers and of performers who, oh, I just can't stand the spotlight. Why won't people leave me alone? Well, all right, fine, get a real job. You know, if you don't like the people you're performing in front of, the people you write for, whatever, then fine. You know, it's mutatis mutandis. It's a bit like my father's comment when I asked him when the stage fright would go away, and he said, "If you're any good, never." Because the stage fright you feel is the respect you have for your audience. And as he said, if you lose that, you have no business taking their money and you should get a real job. And I believe that. I believe that very strongly. And you see, when you're writing a book, you're doing two different things. One, you're serving the audience, you're serving the readers, but you're also serving the subject of the book. And that's also something important because it's like that Father Ford book on St. Francis Xavier that was such a hatchet job. I can't imagine spending months of my life with a given topic or person that I loathed. Why would you do that?
Right.
I wouldn't want to. Anyhow, so I hope that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Will has a couple questions. He says, will Charles speak on the history and the background of northern New York, particularly the area around Watertown? I had a 2 times great-grandmother from Watertown. Thank you.
Oh, no.
All right.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I don't mind talking about upstate. Because you got to bear in mind that upstate is anything from Yonkers to Lake Champlain. Right. It's all upstate. Yeah. It's all upstate. It's all upstate, all up there. Actually, that part of the state, Watertown, I know a little bit about it. It was part of New France. The St. Lawrence Valley was, of course, the artery of New France. There was a French fort on the side of Watertown. I forget what it was called, but I know it was there. The population primarily descended French, Canadian, Irish, and some New England Yankees. Watertown, I believe, was occupied by the British in the War of 1812. Certainly, they had posts nearby. And the other thing about Watertown is that being a port on the St. Lawrence, it was a holdover port for places like the Great Lakes, because of course the St. Lawrence goes all the way there. If the Edmund Fitzgerald could have made it to Watertown, it wouldn't have sunk, except that it was nowhere near Watertown. But but the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence are very much an economic unit. They're very tightly connected, nautically. But after that, the fact that it's the closest port to the Adirondack Mountains, there's not a lot to be said that I know of for Watertown. My dad owned a farm in Oxford, New York, which is not too far from Watertown. They have a cathedral in Watertown. That's about all I know.
Okay. Next question. What are Charles's thoughts on single-sex education?
I favor it. I mean, my first 2 years were at an all-boys Catholic high school. My second 2 years of high school were at a Catholic co-ed school, and my grades dropped, just collapsed.
Why?
Are you seriously asking me that question?
I just had to. I don't know. It's right there. Okay.
For those who believe no explanation is necessary. For those who do not, none is possible. So all I can tell you is if you remember the attraction of women for men, I know that's not remembered anymore, but once upon a time was the thing. And if you're familiar with that at all, then you'll know why. And if you're not, there's nothing I can explain that'll make sense.
Okay. What is the Catholic Church's stance on psychotherapy?
Half its leaders could use some. Sorry, that came out wrong. It depends on the psychotherapy. Part of the problem with all the schools of psychotherapy is the tendency to subjectivize everything and to reduce religiosity to a mental thing. But that having been said, there are good Catholic psychotherapists out there who have a Catholic understanding of the human being and his mind. Now, by the same token, Freud reduced religiosity to misplaced sexuality. And the joke used to be the difference between Freud and Jung was that Jung thought it was the other way around. A lot of misplaced sexuality was really misplaced religiosity. But Jung, again, was not what you would call an Orthodox Catholic by any stretch. Although it's interesting that he would not treat Catholics. He kept a list of good men he considered to be good confessors, and if a Catholic came to him, he'd say, "You don't need me, you need, Father so-and-so."
Okay. All right. That's it for the pre-show.
That's it.
That's it.
That's no, really?
Absolutely. We're over the 35-minute mark. It's a good pre-show.
But what about self-understanding?
Oh, stay tuned for the full episode to get more about self-understanding.
Oh, so are we gonna do a little amateur psychotherapy? Is this gonna be like an encounter group?
Sure. Why not?
Aren't you glad you missed the 60s?
Yes, I am.
Would you have joined an encounter group if it had been offered?
No.
No? You would just say no? You would turn your back on the proud old psychotherapeutic tradition of encounter groups?
Yes.
How about Rolfing?
Rolfing?
Rolfing.
What is that?
Rolfing. You've never heard of Rolfing? It's a technique, of course. It's a little hard for me to describe. I've never been rolfed, but it's a massage thing. Actually, I take it back. I was rolfed once. I knew a girl who did rolfing. How is it different from massage? That's a good question. The effect of a good massage can leave you feeling looser and more relaxed for some time. Rolfing, on the other hand, focuses on realigning and integrating your whole body and creating structural changes. The goal is to find long-lasting relief. It's an alternative medicine. Originally developed by Ida Rolf, 1896-1979, as structural integration. It is, I like this. Rolfing is marketed with unproven claims of various health benefits. Yeah. It is based on Rolf's ideas about how the human body's energy field can benefit when aligned with the Earth's gravitational field. See?
Seriously?
Yeah.
That was all. I was curious until that last line, and then I wasn't curious anymore.
Did you see how you are?
No, that was like, it was like, I don't know.
I got Rolfed back in 1979 or 80.
How'd that go?
I'm in touch with the Earth's gravitational field, I guess.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. It actually felt like a slightly unsatisfying massage.
That's kind of a brutal review.
Well, no, I mean, because, like I've always had a spot right here. It's painful now.
Yeah.
It's always been a knot,
Yeah.
so I go to a chiropractor or something and the guy goes to work on it. But, she sort of touched it lightly and pushed it and, she didn't dig in the way I would have liked. That's what I mean by
Wow.
slightly unsatisfying. It's better than nothing, but I've got a lot of always have had a lot of muscular problems. I've got a rib that's constantly popping out of the cage and has to be smacked back in.
Ouch.
And I haven't been to a chiropractor in 6 years. So when the time comes that I do, I mean, I'm sure it's going to sound like a cork popping out of a bottle. Then they go to work on the muscles, that have been out of place for so long. Don't ask me about my chakras.
I won't. All right. A lot of good stuff in the full episode. Stay tuned.
No Rolfing in the full episode?
No Rolfing.
Okay.